This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and at numberfire.com, and this is episode 588 of the Late Round Podcast, and the many shows that are part of the FanDuel Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. What better way to gear up for the weekend than to spice up your thirsty Thursday night football with FanDuel and Captain Morgan? Introducing Captain Morgan's Thursday Night Pick'em, a completely free-to-play contest series that gives you 4 chances to win a share of $10,000. Here's how it works. FanDuel fans will have the chance to answer 10 questions centered around both Captain Morgan and that Thursday's NFL matchup. Fans who answer the most questions correctly will be eligible to earn their share of the week's $10,000 cash prize. Thursday Night Football will kick off before you know it, so head to FanDuel.com/CaptainMorganNFL and spice up your game day today. Must be 21 years or older to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. And don't forget to spice up your game day with Captain Morgan. It's a 10 Trends day. Let's get to it. It's been rough for DK Metcalf. Across his first 8 games, which included some with Geno Smith, Metcalf averaged over 18 PPR points per game. Over his last 3, all with Russell Wilson, he's averaged 5 points per game. I know a lot of you are panicking, and that's a normal reaction. I think the good news is that Monday night's game against Washington did seem a little fluky. Metcalf only saw 13% of Seattle's targets. His target shares in the 2 previous games were 21% and 32%. Russell Wilson doesn't look right, though. That's the issue. Fortunately, they've got some beatable matchups upcoming. 3 of their next 5 games are plus matchups for wide receivers according to adjusted fantasy points allowed. I think all you can do right now is hold tight. And I do think things will get better for DK Metcalf. Maybe not 18 or 19 points per game, but he'll be far better than he is now just based on his peripherals and the matchups. The Jets have been so bad against team running backs this year in adjusted fantasy points allowed. Through 12 weeks, my numbers show that the Jets are the worst team against the position. But beyond that, they're allowing 10.6 more points to be scored on them than what a team typically scores. To put that another way, if a team entered a game against the Jets where the running backs for that team were averaging 20 points per game, we'd expect them to score over 30 against the Jets. And that's team running backs, not just one running back. That differential is the highest by far across all positions in fantasy football. Among the 37 quarterbacks this year with 100 or more pass attempts, Justin Herbert ranks 32nd in deep ball rate. And I'm defining that as throws that traveled 15 or more yards through the air. That seems low given his arm talent and some of the weapons that they have on that team. But it's even worse when you look at how well he's doing on those throws. Among that same group of 37, Herbert only trails Kyler Murray in completion percentage on those throws. Unfortunately, until we see a change in these tendencies, it's tough to buy into a Mike Williams bounce back, because Williams can stretch the field. The fact that they have Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen, that's definitely playing a role here. But the Chargers should consider throwing it deep more often. Trend 4 this week is about Elijah Mitchell, one of the players I've talked most about on this show this season. There's been on and off worry about how he'd be deployed as a pass catcher, but JaMychal Hasty's banged up and Mitchell's just a very good player. As a result, on Sunday, he saw a 23% target share. That's by far his highest target share of the season. In 2 of his last 3 games, he's now hit a double-digit percentage target share. That's the type of usage that we need him to see for him to be an RB1 in fantasy. And as long as Hasty, who they've utilized as a pass catcher, as long as he's sidelined, Mitchell should be a top 10 back. And that's especially true with the injuries at the position across the league. It feels like Deontay Johnson is still underrated in fantasy football, but he's a target monster because he's an incredibly talented wide receiver. In week 12, Johnson had a target share of 35.9%. That was another great outing. He's hit the 30% target share mark in 6 games this year. The only other wide receivers to do that have been Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, and DJ Moore. That's it. Keep buying Deontay Johnson. The 6th trend is more of a transaction than a trend, but let's do it anyway. Don't sleep on Clyde Edwards-Helaire in fantasy football. In his return in week 11, he saw 71% of Kansas City's running back rushes, which was right in line with what he'd been seeing from weeks 1 through 3. He had a 6% target share too. And obviously that short yardage rushing touchdown. If he maintains that sort of backfield share, he should be very usable. We'd like to see a higher target share, but we also know the Chiefs are capable of having a very good offense. That raises CEH's floor and ceiling. And if you look at their remaining schedule, it's really good. They've got a top 5 schedule for running backs from here on out, including a top 5 schedule in the playoffs. So I think CEH is a buy candidate right now. I could have talked about him on the 15 Transaction Show, and I still might next week, depending on how this week goes. So there's a little spoiler alert. A lot has been said about Courtland Sutton's splits with and without Jerry Jeudy this season. In games without Jeudy, Sutton's averaged a target share per game of 25.7%. He's almost scored 17 PPR points per game. With Jeudy this year, that target share per game drops to 11%, and he's averaging just 4.2 PPR points per game. As of right now, you cannot put Courtland Sutton in your lineups. But let's not lose sight of the fact that Jeudy himself hasn't been anything special this year either. He's averages 10 PPR points per game, and he's coming off a Week 12 contest where he saw just 13% of the team's targets and 4.5 points. Now, I feel a lot better about Jeudy than Sutton rest of season. But this team has such a good running back schedule that I'm a little concerned about the volume for both wide receivers from here on out. Not just Courtland Sutton. I've talked about this plenty of times in the past, but an easy way to spot regression is by looking at how many yards a player has versus how many touchdowns he's scored. Yards correlate to touchdowns. It's a very quick and easy way to spot regression. You don't need a complex formula when you look at things at a high level. When you look at how wide receivers have scored touchdowns over the last decade and use that number to calculate touchdown expectation for this season, the wideout who's underperformed most so far this year in the touchdown column is Keenan Allen. He only has 2 touchdowns when his yardage total, it says he should have closer to 5.5. That's just something to think about if you've got him on your roster. I'm still nervous about what might happen to Antonio Gibson in a negative game script. But if J.D. McKissic misses time, Gibson should be in store for more looks through the air. But even before McKissic's injury on Monday night, Gibson was seeing more targets in that Washington offense. And he finished the day with a 20.6% target share. That's his highest target share by far since week 1. It was the first time that he hit a double-digit percentage since that point. There's a much higher ceiling for Antonio Gibson if he's able to capture looks through the air like that. For the last trend this week, let's talk a little bit about Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. I won't hide from the fact that after week 2 on the 15 Transaction Show, I said that Tom Brady was a sell candidate. That I didn't view him as a top 3 or so quarterback. But a lot of others did. And I'm not bringing up this trend to do any victory lapping. Since that point in time, he's been the QB5 in points per game. But I'll talk more about Brady after the season when I talk about the things that I got right and the things that I got wrong. Because overall, I was too low on Brady this year. And for the record, for those of you who are new, I do a podcast going through both my hits and misses each season. But at the time, after week 2, they had 9 passing touchdowns and 0 rushing touchdowns. I recognize that the Bucs would probably be on the higher end in that statistic from then on out. Because look at the team, look at their personnel. But that wasn't going to keep up. It never keeps up to that pace. Regression always ends up winning. And since that point in time, the Buccaneers have thrown for 21 touchdowns and they've rushed for 12. They went from a pass to rush touchdown ratio of 9 to one that's under 2. Now across the season, they don't even have the highest ratio in the league. The Buccaneers offense is just really good at scoring touchdowns because it's good. So everyone in that offense wins. And I actually think that they're set to flip that ratio a little bit more. I think we're going to see a better Tom Brady in fantasy football very soon. I'm just pointing this out because I don't talk about the things that I talk about on this show for laughs. They're really, really simple tricks to spot regression and to see what's sustainable and what's not. Pass to rush touchdown ratio is so simple, but it can be really, really helpful. That's going to do it for today's show. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet to subscribe to the Late Round Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow with the Weekly Sleeper Show.